The alien world was burning. From the black skies, fire rained down as enemy warships released their weapons on cities that had stood for thousands of years. Towers crumbled, oceans boiled, and entire continents shook with explosions. In the middle of this destruction, a small fleet of broken ships tried to send a signal. Their engines were failing, their shields nearly gone, but they had only one chance left. A desperate voice came across the stars, translated into 100 languages by ancient machines. "This is the Visari Union. We beg for aid. Our defenses are shattered. Our people are dying. Please, if any hear us, save us from this slaughter." Across the galaxy, in the shining chamber of the Galactic Council, silence fell. Delegates from dozens of species sat frozen, their eyes locked on the trembling hologram that hovered in the air. The Visari were not weak. They were known as strong traders, skilled with fleets, and proud of their colonies. For them to beg meant something greater than fear. It meant they were broken. The chamber buzzed with whispers, claws tapping on tables, wings twitching and glowing eyes narrowing. Then the signal repeated, but this time something different came through. Static filled the chamber. Then a second voice, broken but clear, cut across the silence. "Send the Deathworlders!" The words fell like a blade. The air itself felt heavier. Every delegate turned, staring at one another in disbelief. Some shouted, some hissed, some trembled, but all felt the same cold fear. The oldest of the council members, a scaled creature with golden eyes, rose slowly from his seat. His voice cracked as he whispered, "They did not call for allies. They did not call for fleets. They called for humans." The chamber erupted in chaos. For centuries, humanity had stood apart. The other species of the galaxy called Earth a death world, a place too wild, too dangerous, where storms could crush mountains and predators hunted with endless hunger. From such a world, the humans had risen, strong, stubborn, and fierce. They had joined the stars not long ago, but already their name carried weight. When humans fought, they did not stop. When humans promised aid, they did not retreat. When humans unleashed their fleets, entire armadas vanished. And now the Visari had asked for them by name. The council leader struck his staff to restore silence, but even then the chamber shook with fear. "We cannot allow this," one delegate cried. "If humans go, they will not stop with saving the Visari. They will claim territory. They will bring their war machines." Another shouted back, "Would you rather let the Visari die and let the enemy grow stronger? If humans are the only ones who can fight them, then perhaps we must pay the price." The debate raged, voices rising and falling like a storm. But the words, "Send the Deathworlders," continued to echo inside every mind. They could not ignore the call, but they feared the answer even more. Far away, orbiting the blue marble of Earth, the signal reached its final destination. Deep within a command station, humans listened. Screens glowed with the burning images of the Visari world. Smoke, fire, destruction, and despair filled the room. Soldiers stood in silence, their faces grim, their fists clenched. No one needed to ask what came next. The commander, tall and scarred, stepped forward. His voice was steady, but it carried the weight of iron. "Prepare the fleet." Alarms blared, hangar bays opened, and giant ships awoke from their slumber. Engines lit up the dark, painting space with burning trails of light. Warships, carriers, dreadnoughts, and cruisers turned in formation, each one a titan of steel from orbit. Earth glowed below them, blue and green, peaceful and calm, while above, its children gathered their strength for war. Human soldiers marched into carriers, armor gleaming black, helmets hiding faces that no fear could shake. They said nothing. They needed no words. The Visari had begged, and humanity had answered. Back in the council chamber, a messenger burst through the doors. "The humans have moved," he cried. The delegates turned as one, horror on their faces. A massive hologram showed the human fleet leaving orbit, wave after wave of ships spreading into the void. Larger than any fleet the council had ever assembled, darker than shadows, brighter than fire. They moved with a single will. The chamber grew silent once more. No one spoke now, for all knew the truth. The Visari had called for aid, but the galaxy had unleashed something greater. Humanity was on the march, and nothing could stop them once they began. The transmission ended with a final glimpse of Earth's fleet, a line of Titans stretching beyond the edge of the screen. Engines roared, weapons armed, and in the darkness of space, the Deathworlders advanced. The enemy's warlords, confident in their strength, suddenly detect a massive signal on their scanners. A fleet is coming for them, and it is human. The chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so loud. Dozens of alien leaders shouted across the curved hall, their voices overlapping, their eyes filled with panic. The hologram of Earth's fleet still hovered above the floor, glowing with the terrifying image of giant human warships forming into lines. The signal of the Visari's desperate plea had been bad enough, but the moment the humans moved, the chamber fell into a storm of fear. "This is madness," one insectoid delegate cried, her antennae trembling. "You cannot allow humans to march their fleets across our space. They will not stop once they taste battle." A scaled predator slammed his claw against the table. "And what is your solution? Let the Visari die? Do you want the enemy to grow so strong that none of us can fight them?" A creature of feathers spread his wings and hissed, "We are choosing between two disasters. If humans win, we are doomed. If they lose, we are doomed." The council leader struck his staff against the floor. The sound echoed, silencing the noise for a brief moment. His many eyes shifted slowly as he spoke. "We are not deciding if they will go. We are deciding if we will survive once they do." The words cut through the room like a blade. Everyone knew the truth. Humanity had already decided. No law, no treaty, no protest could stop them. The Visari had called, and humans had answered. On the walls of the chamber, feeds from across the galaxy played. In one image, Visari cities crumbled into ash. In another, alien civilians whispered in fear, some praying, some hiding. But the feed that drew the most silence was the one showing Earth's fleet. Dreadnoughts as large as mountains moved in formation. Carriers opened their hangars to reveal endless squadrons of fighters, and railguns glowed with deadly light. To the council, it was not a fleet. It was a storm of steel and fire. An elder with pale skin and long tusks spoke, his voice shaking. "I was young when I first heard the stories. The humans fought the Car Dominion centuries ago. The Car had hundreds of fleets, endless resources. They mocked humans, called them primitive. The humans fought for only 5 years, and the Dominion was erased from the stars. Nothing remained but ruins." The chamber froze. Few had dared speak of the Car in years, but the memory remained. Some turned their eyes toward the hologram with new horror. Others tried to deny the danger. "That was a legend," one argued. "Exaggeration from a war long forgotten. You cannot believe every story whispered in the void." But the elder shook his head. "Legends may bend, but they do not rise from nothing. I tell you, I saw the aftermath. I saw the human ships burning across the stars, but they kept fighting until their enemies were gone. They do not fight wars, they end them." The silence was shattered when another messenger ran into the chamber. His voice shook as he cried out, "Reports confirm human fleets have left orbit of Earth. Their course is direct. They are heading for Visari space." The chamber erupted again, this time in terror. Some shouted that the council must stop them. Others demanded they support them, while many simply sat in frozen silence. The thought of thousands of human warships moving with single purpose was enough to make even the strongest species tremble. Across the galaxy, ordinary citizens watched the same feeds. Some cheered, believing salvation had come. Others wept, fearing that salvation would cost them their future. In quiet homes and busy marketplaces, one phrase spread like wildfire: "The Deathworlders are coming." It was not spoken as hope. It was spoken as warning. Back in the council chamber, one delegate rose with sharp eyes. "Do you not see what this means? If humans win, if they crush the invaders, the Visari will owe them everything. Others will follow. Soon, every empire will depend on humans for protection. And when that day comes, they will no longer be partners. They will be rulers." The words drew a chill across the chamber. The thought was not new, but spoken aloud it became real. Humanity, the newcomers, the outsiders, could rise above them all. The leader of the council struck his staff again, the sound sharp. Enough, the humans march. Nothing will change that. We must prepare for what comes after. He raised his voice louder, shaking the chamber. We must decide now. Do we resist them after the war, or do we bow before them when they return as heroes? As the words echoed, the feed shifted again. This time, the council saw something new. The human flagship, larger than all others, opened a bay. Inside, hidden in shadow, strange shapes moved. Weapons no one in the galaxy recognized. Energy readings spiked, and even from across the stars, the council chamber shook. For a moment, every delegate felt the same sensation. It was not hope. It was not salvation. It was dread. The human flagship transmitted a short signal across open channels. One simple message repeated in every alien tongue, "We come." The chamber fell silent, and every leader knew the galaxy was about to change forever. The stars above Earth glowed with fire as the human fleet formed. From the blue planet below, it looked like a crown of steel rising into the dark sky. One by one, enormous engines roared to life, shaking the void with their power. Dreadnoughts as tall as mountains, carriers with entire cities inside them, and cruisers armed with railguns lined up in perfect order. Hundreds of smaller escort ships darted between them, like wolves guarding giants. The fleet moved with unity, every vessel part of one purpose. It was not just a military march. It was the march of steel. Inside the flagship, soldiers in black armor moved down endless corridors. Their boots echoed on metal floors, and their silence was more terrifying than any battle cry. Their helmets reflected the glow of red lights as they passed, faceless, disciplined, ready. In the hangars, fighters were being loaded, sleek machines with sharp wings, engines pulsing with deadly energy. Technicians shouted orders, but the soldiers did not need them. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Humanity did not go to war often, but when they did, they carried the weight of a death world behind them. At the command bridge, the fleet's commander stood tall, watching the stars. His scarred face was calm, his eyes sharp as blades. Around him, officers worked quickly, updating charts, aligning fleets, calculating jumps. Yet not one voice carried fear. The humans were not afraid of the enemy. They were focused only on victory. The commander raised his hand and silence fell. "This is not a mission of mercy," he said. "This is not a battle for pride. This is war. And war is what we do best." His words were carried across the fleet, and every soldier, pilot, and officer listened in silence. On the outer hulls of the great ships, weapons rotated and locked into position. Railguns longer than city blocks pointed forward. Missile bays slid open, each one armed with payloads strong enough to tear planets apart. Plasma cannons hummed, glowing with deadly blue light. Each ship was a monster of metal, built to survive anything, built to destroy anything. In the stillness of space, they waited only for the command to advance. Across the galaxy, other species watched the broadcast. Even the enemy invaders monitored the movement of the human fleet. In their war rooms, alien generals scoffed at the size of the ships. They called the humans reckless, foolish, desperate. But in their eyes, shadows of doubt already formed. Few fleets in history had looked so massive, so disciplined, so relentless. The Galactic Council watched too. In their grand chamber, the hologram of the marching fleet stretched across the dome. Delegates stared in disbelief as the humans assembled into a wall of fire and steel. Some whispered prayers, some cursed, others sat frozen. The thought of that armada moving toward the Visari war zone filled them with dread. "If they can command such numbers so quickly," one delegate muttered, "then what have they been hiding all these years?" No one answered. No one dared. In the flagship, the commander gave the final order. "Engage drives!" Engines flared, lighting up the darkness with burning trails. The fleet stretched into long lines, forming a spear that pointed toward the distant stars. The void itself seemed to tremble as hyperspace jump gates prepared to open. Soldiers gripped their weapons, pilots sealed their helmets, and technicians locked down systems. The moment had come. Humanity was about to cross the stars, not as traders, not as diplomats, but as Deathworlders at war. The countdown began. 10. The engines screamed louder. 9. Energy surged through every system. 8. Shields flared around the ships, glowing like fire. 7. Fighters launched from hangars, circling like angry swarms. 6. The stars bent as hyperspace channels opened. 5. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. 4. The commander closed his eyes for a brief second, remembering Earth below, peaceful and calm. 3. His eyes opened with iron resolve. 2. He raised his hand. 1. The void split open. Hyperspace swallowed the fleet in a storm of light. The ships vanished in a blur, leaving only burning trails behind. In seconds, Earth's orbit was empty, but across the galaxy, scanners lit up with warnings. A massive fleet was coming, a fleet that no one could stop. On the battlefield near the Visari world, the enemy's warlords sat confident. Their fleets covered the skies, their cannons rained fire on the cities below. They mocked the Visari pleas, certain no one could challenge their power. But then their long-range sensors began to scream. Alarms blared. Numbers appeared on their screens, ship counts so high they seemed impossible. A fleet was inbound. Unknown class, unknown weapons, unknown strength. But one word repeated in every translation: human. The warlords leaned closer to their screens. First they saw shadows, then signatures, then images of ships larger than anything they had ever faced. The laughter died in their throats. The humans were coming, and they were bringing a storm. On the Visari homeworld, survivors hiding in the ruins looked up at the night sky. The fires of invasion still burned, but among the smoke, streaks of light suddenly appeared. The Deathworlder fleet had arrived. The skies above the Visari homeworld burned with fire. Enemy warships covered the orbit like a swarm of locusts, their cannons raining destruction on the cities below. On the surface, towers collapsed, streets split open, and millions of voices cried out for salvation. The Visari had fought with everything they had, but their fleets were broken, their armies shattered. All they could do was wait for the end. Then the night sky changed. From beyond the blackness, streaks of light appeared, bright and sharp, tearing through the stars like falling blades. The ground shook, the air trembled, and a roar like thunder rolled across the heavens. The humans had arrived. The enemy warlords sneered at first. "More prey," one growled. "More ships to slaughter." They laughed, confident in their numbers. But their laughter ended when the scanners updated. Thousands of human warships filled the orbit, dreadnoughts and carriers lined in perfect formation, weapons already locked. The humans had come not as prey, but as predators. Inside the human flagship, the commander stood tall. His voice carried across the fleet. "No retreat, no surrender. Today we show them why Earth is called a death world." At his signal, the fleet unleashed its fury. Railguns fired first. Massive slugs of tungsten shot across the void, faster than light, tearing through enemy ships like paper. Cruisers shattered, their hulls splitting open in bursts of fire. Plasma cannons roared, blue light spearing across the battlefield and slicing entire wings of fighters in half. Missile bays opened, releasing storms of warheads that tracked targets with merciless precision. Explosions lit the dark, one after another, until the sky became a storm of fire. The enemy fought back, their own cannons spitting beams of energy, their fighters swarming the human lines. For a moment, the battle seemed balanced. Then the humans advanced. Dreadnoughts pushed forward like mountains moving through space, shrugging off blasts that would have destroyed lesser ships. Human fighters cut through the swarms, flying in perfect formations, outmaneuvering enemies with ruthless efficiency. Every move was calculated, every strike decisive. The humans did not waste effort. They did not hesitate. They destroyed. On the ground, Visari survivors watched in awe. The sky that had once rained death now rained fire upon their enemies. They saw human warships blotting out the stars, their weapons carving the invaders apart. For the first time in weeks they felt hope, though it came with fear. The humans were saviors, but their savagery was terrifying. In the council chamber far across the galaxy, alien leaders stared at the live feeds. Some gasped, some covered their eyes, some whispered prayers. They had expected humans to fight hard, but not like this. It was not a battle. It was slaughter. Human fleets moved like a single living creature, devouring everything in their path. One delegate whispered, "This is not a rescue. This is an extinction." The enemy warlords began to panic. One shouted for reinforcements, another screamed for retreat. But before they could act, the human flagship revealed its hidden weapon. A massive section of the hull split open, and inside glowed a cannon unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Energy built within it, bright as a sun, humming with deadly power. Sensors spiked, alarms screamed, and even the enemy generals felt fear claw their hearts. The cannon fired. A beam of pure destruction cut across the orbit, striking the enemy flagship. The giant vessel did not resist. It did not even last seconds. It split apart in a single flash, breaking into burning pieces that spiraled down into the atmosphere. The shockwave rippled through the enemy fleet, tearing weaker ships apart, sending survivors scattering. But the humans did not pause. They pressed forward, their weapons firing in endless rhythm. Ship after ship fell, enemy formations shattered, and in minutes the balance of power was gone. The invaders who had crushed the Vesari for weeks were now being annihilated in hours. Still, the enemy did not surrender. They unleashed their final weapon, a massive cannon hidden on the surface, powered by the core of the planet itself. Energy gathered at its mouth, brighter than lightning, deadlier than any fleet weapon. The humans saw it too late. The beam fired, ripping through the void. One of the human dreadnoughts, a titan of steel, took the full blast. For a moment its shields flared, glowing like a second sun. Then the ship cracked apart, splitting into two burning halves. The explosion lit the entire battlefield, a reminder that even Deathworlders could bleed. The council chamber gasped. The Vesari survivors on the ground screamed. The enemy warlords roared with new courage. For the first time in the battle, it seemed the humans might be stopped. On the flagship's bridge, the commander stared at the screen, his jaw set. "Target the surface weapon," he ordered. The fleet shifted, weapons turning downward toward the planet itself. The order was clear. If the weapon was not destroyed, humanity would bring its fury directly onto the world. The Vesari homeworld shook as fire lit the skies. Human warships shifted into position above the surface, their weapons aimed at the massive planetary cannon that had just torn a dreadnought apart. Yet instead of opening fire, the humans did something the galaxy had not expected. They prepared to descend. From the hangars of the great carriers, rows of drop pods lined up like steel arrows. Inside each one, human soldiers sat in silence, armor sealed, weapons locked across their chests. The red light above their helmets flickered, then turned green. Engines roared to life. The pods launched all at once, streaks of fire cutting through the dark void and plunging into the atmosphere like meteors. On the ground, Vesari civilians hiding in ruins saw the streaks and gasped. Some thought the enemy was sending another wave of destruction, but others whispered in disbelief. The humans have come. The enemy forces on the surface panicked. Their commanders shouted orders, their cannons turned skyward, and their fighters scrambled to intercept. But the pods fell too fast. Explosions rocked the earth as the first pods slammed into the ground, doors blasting open. From the smoke stepped figures in black armor, tall and silent, weapons gleaming in the flames. The Deathworld soldiers had arrived. The first squad moved through the ruins of a shattered city. Their steps were heavy, their visors glowing faint red, their weapons already spitting fire. Enemy troops poured from the shadows, screaming war cries, but the humans advanced without slowing. They moved with precision, every burst of fire cutting down entire groups. Where the enemy hesitated, the humans pressed. Where the enemy charged, the humans broke them apart. The Vesari watched from hiding places as the soldiers marched past. They had heard the legends, but the truth was more terrifying than any story. These were not ordinary fighters. They did not flinch when explosions shook the ground. They did not falter when outnumbered. They fought as if the battlefield itself belonged to them. One Vesari elder whispered to his grandson, "These are not soldiers. These are storms in human form." Far above, the commander on the flagship gave orders calmly. "Secure the city. Neutralize the cannon. Protect the civilians where possible." The words were simple, but the meaning was clear. This was no longer a space battle. It was now war on the ground. Human tanks rolled from heavy dropships, their cannons tearing through enemy fortifications. Drones hovered overhead, scanning and targeting with ruthless accuracy. Air support screamed across the skies, jets unleashing missiles into bunkers and anti-air defenses. Every move was synchronized, every strike planned. The enemy had numbers, but the humans had mastery of war. One squad of humans pushed directly toward the planetary cannon. The massive weapon towered above the battlefield, its core glowing with stolen energy from the planet's heart. Enemy forces guarded it in the thousands, lined with shields and artillery. Yet the humans did not slow. They advanced with unshakable purpose, weapons blazing, cutting through enemy ranks like blades through smoke. Among the enemy, commanders shouted in disbelief. "They fight like machines. They do not stop. They do not break." Fear spread even faster than fire. Some enemy troops fled. Others charged blindly, only to be cut down. One soldier stood apart from his squad for a brief moment. He tore off his helmet, his scarred face revealed beneath the smoke. An enemy officer froze when he saw him. Recognition struck, terror in his eyes. He whispered to his comrades, "It is him, the human butcher from the Dominion War." His voice shook. "We cannot win." The words spread like poison through their ranks. On the surface, Vesari civilians gathered behind rubble to watch the battle. They saw the humans standing tall in flames, weapons cutting down invaders who had once seemed unstoppable. For the first time they cheered, but even their cheers carried fear. Salvation had arrived, but at what cost? In the council chamber, the alien delegates watched the same footage. Their faces were pale, their voices silent. They had expected ferocity. They had not expected this level of precision and brutality. One delegate finally spoke in a trembling voice. "If humans fight like this against enemies, how will anyone ever stand against them if they turn on us?" No one answered. No one dared. On the battlefield, the squad reached the base of the planetary cannon. Enemy fire poured down from above, but the humans raised their weapons and advanced into the storm. Explosions ripped the ground, smoke choked the air, but still they climbed the hill. With each step, they drew closer to the weapon that threatened the entire fleet. The enemy commander inside the cannon gave his last desperate order. "Activate the core. Overload the weapon. If we cannot stop them, we will take them with us." Sirens blared. Energy levels spiked. The entire cannon began to glow with blinding light. Even from orbit, sensors screamed warnings. If the cannon detonated, it would tear the city, the soldiers, and perhaps even the fleet above from the sky. The human squad leader looked up at the glowing cannon, then raised his hand to signal his team forward. His voice was calm, almost cold. "We end this now." The squad charged into the fire as the weapons core screamed toward overload. The battlefield roared with fire as the human squad fought its way to the base of the planetary cannon. Enemy soldiers screamed from their fortifications, energy blasts streaked through the air, and explosions shook the ground, but the humans pressed forward without hesitation. Their movements were precise, their fire relentless, their discipline unshaken. The cannon's core burned brighter with each passing second, threatening to detonate with enough force to destroy everything within hundreds of kilometers. In the command chamber of the cannon, the enemy general's hands shook as he watched the monitors. Every defensive line had fallen. Every strategy had failed. The humans were still coming closer and closer. His second-in-command whispered in fear, "They should not exist. No species fights like this." The general's eyes narrowed. "I know who they are. I have seen them before." He turned to his officers, his voice harsh and low. "Long ago, before you were born, there was another war. The humans faced the Ka Dominion. The Car had endless fleets, endless soldiers. They believed no one could challenge them. The humans did not argue. They did not negotiate. They destroyed. I was a young soldier then, stationed at the edge of the war. I watched from orbit as entire star systems burned. I saw human fleets fight until nothing was left but silence. The Dominion thought they were immortal. The humans made them a memory. His voice broke, his scales trembling. I swore I would never face them again. Yet here they are, standing at my gates. His words spread like poison through the chamber. Officers, who had been shouting orders moments before, fell silent. Soldiers who had sworn to fight until death now hesitated. Fear gripped them deeper than any weapon. For stories may fade, but legends do not die. Far above, in the orbit of the Visari homeworld, the Galactic Council watched the live feeds. The chamber was silent, except for the flicker of fire on the screens. Delegates who had once demanded action now sat frozen in terror. One of the elders finally spoke, his voice breaking. The stories were true. We thought they were myths, exaggerated tales told by frightened survivors. But they were warnings. The humans are not warriors. They are extinction given form. Another delegate tried to protest. They are our allies now. They fight for us. His voice was thin, unconvincing. The others turned to him with hollow eyes. A feathered delegate whispered, "Yes, but when they finish with the enemy, who will they fight next?" The chamber fell quiet again, for no one dared answer. On the surface, Visari civilians crowded into the ruins, staring at the human soldiers in awe. They whispered prayers, not sure if they were thanking saviors or begging not to be destroyed themselves. Children pointed at the armored figures, their eyes wide with wonder, while elders lowered their heads in fear. The humans fought for them, but they fought with such terrifying precision that no one could forget they were born from a death world. Inside the planetary cannon, alarms screamed as the core reached critical levels. The glow turned blinding, cracks forming across the weapon's frame. If it exploded, the city and half the fleet above would burn in the blast. The enemy general fell to his knees, his eyes wide. It is over. Even if we destroy them, they will take us with them. But the humans were already inside. The squad stormed the chamber with weapons raised, cutting down guards before they could even react. Smoke and sparks filled the air as they moved toward the core. Their leader signaled the demolitions expert forward. The soldier placed a heavy pack against the glowing machinery, working calmly as if the world were not seconds from ending. The general stared at them in disbelief. "Do you not fear death? Do you not fear the end?" The human leader turned his visor toward him, voice low and steady. "We come from Earth. Death has never frightened us." The charge detonated, controlled and precise. The core's glow flickered, then collapsed into darkness. The weapon went silent. Its threat ended in a single moment. Relief rippled across the battlefield, but it was mixed with awe. The humans had walked into fire and torn out the heart of the weapon as if it were nothing. In orbit, the commander received the signal. "Cannon neutralized." His scarred face remained calm, but his eyes hardened. "Then prepare for phase 2. We end the invaders completely." Across the fleet, weapons reloaded, ships reformed lines, and the humans prepared to crush the enemy without mercy. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the silence deepened. The delegates had just witnessed what they had feared most. The humans had stared down annihilation and survived. They had walked through death and returned stronger. One delegate whispered, trembling, "If they can do this to our enemies, then one day they could do it to us." Another leaned close, eyes burning with dread. "It will not be one day, it will be soon. Because once humanity begins war, they do not stop until they have no rivals left." On the edge of the system, scanners blared with new signals. A second enemy fleet had arrived, 10 times larger than the first. The humans had won the battle on the ground, but the real war was only beginning. The Visari skies still burned with smoke when the new signals came. Across orbit, human scanners screamed with warning tones. On the flagship's bridge, officers stared in disbelief as numbers filled their screens. A second enemy fleet had arrived, larger than anything they had ever faced. Wave after wave of red signatures lit up the monitors, stretching across the void, until the stars themselves seemed buried. The commander's eyes narrowed. "Report. 10 times their original strength, sir," one officer replied, his voice low. "Carriers, dreadnoughts, supercapitals. Their fleet fills the entire system. We are outnumbered, surrounded." The bridge fell silent. The humans had just crushed the first invasion fleet, but this was different. This was an armada built to destroy entire civilizations. Even the human fleet, mighty as it was, could not hold forever. Far away in the Galactic Council chamber, panic broke out as the same signals appeared on their own screens. Delegates shouted over one another, their fear now uncontrollable. "The humans cannot stand against this," one cried. "They will be destroyed," another hissed back. "Do you not understand? If the humans are destroyed, then nothing will be left to stop the enemy. We will be next." The council leader struck his staff, silencing them. His many eyes turned to the hologram of the human fleet. "We will see what they are truly capable of," he said, "and we will learn if the legends were lies." Back in orbit, the enemy armada closed in, surrounding the Vesari world. Their commanders sneered at the sight of the human fleet. "So these are the Deathworlders," one growled. "They destroyed our first wave, but against this, they will fall." Their ships shifted into formation, energy building in their cannons, preparing to rain annihilation across the human lines. The human commander stood motionless at the center of his bridge. He did not flinch. He did not fear. His voice was calm, steady, and cold. "Signal the fleet. Form the shield wall. Prepare the weapon." At once, the massive human dreadnoughts shifted into a defensive line, their shields locking together to form a barrier of light across the planet. Carriers moved behind them, fighters swarming like dark clouds. Smaller cruisers darted between the giants, their guns already glowing with heat. The humans had prepared for this. They had not come to the Vesari world with only ships. They had come with something more. From the flagship's belly, the hidden bay doors opened. Metal groaned, light poured out, and something vast began to emerge. A weapon so massive it looked like a second ship unfolded from the hull, its dark surface glowing with streaks of red. Energy readings spiked across every scanner in the system. Even the enemy warlords leaned forward in shock. "What is that?" one demanded. Another whispered, "A superweapon." The humans brought a superweapon. The weapon glowed brighter, charging with energy drawn from the flagship's core. The battlefield itself seemed to tremble, as if space did not want to contain its power. The commander raised his hand. "Fire!" The weapon unleashed a beam of pure destruction. It cut through the void like a blade, slicing into the nearest enemy formation. Entire squadrons of ships exploded at once, supercapitals splitting open like paper, carriers igniting in storms of fire. The beam swept across the battlefield, leaving only wreckage in its wake. In seconds, thousands of ships were gone. The enemy armada reeled in shock. Their commanders shouted in panic, ordering their fleets to scatter, but the humans pressed forward. Railguns roared, missiles streaked through the dark, and plasma cannons tore through hulls. The first strike had broken the enemy's confidence, but it had also awakened their rage. The enemy's supercapitals powered their own weapons, beams of energy that could shatter moons. They fired together, slamming against the human shield wall. Human dreadnoughts shook under the assault, shields flaring, metal groaning. One cruiser shattered under the force, burning debris raining down into the planet's atmosphere. The line held, but barely. On the ground, Vesari civilians stared at the sky in terror and awe. They saw beams of light streaking across the heavens, explosions ripping the darkness apart. They saw the humans holding the line against an ocean of enemies. Children clutched their parents, elders whispered prayers. They did not know if they were witnessing salvation or the end of all things. In the council chamber, the delegates watched in silence. One feathered leader leaned forward, her voice trembling. "If they win this, nothing in the galaxy will ever match them," an elder replied, his scales shivering. "If they lose, we all die." Back in orbit, the weapon began to charge again. Energy gathered, brighter than a sun, humming so loud that even the hulls of nearby ships vibrated. The commander gave his order. Second strike! The beam fired again, this time cutting into the heart of the enemy fleet. It tore through their largest super capital, splitting it into fragments that burned like falling stars. A cheer erupted across the human fleet, but it was short-lived. The enemy's response came instantly. From deep within their armada, massive shapes moved forward. Not ships, but living weapons. Colossal bioorganic constructs larger than dreadnoughts, their bodies covered in glowing spines. They absorbed the human blasts, their hides turning the energy into fuel. The humans fired again, but the constructs only grew stronger. An officer turned in shock. "Sir, the weapon is not effective against them." "They are feeding on it." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Then we adapt," he turned to his crew. "Reroute power. Load kinetic rounds. Focus fire on the constructs." Across the fleet, railguns shifted, their barrels glowing as new ammunition locked into place. The first volley slammed into the nearest bioship, tearing chunks of flesh and metal from its body. The creature roared, its spines firing beams of raw energy back into the human lines. A battleship took the blast, its shields collapsing before it broke apart in a chain of fire. The humans pressed forward anyway. Fighters swarmed the constructs, missiles slammed into their cores, and railguns pounded their weak points. The battlefield turned into chaos, steel against flesh, fire against energy. Both sides bled, but neither side surrendered. On the flagship's bridge, the commander stood firm. His voice was steady, but his eyes were sharp as blades. "We do not retreat. We do not yield. We are Deathworlders. This is our war." The weapon began to overload, energy levels rising beyond control. Lights flickered across the flagship, alarms screamed, and officers shouted warnings. If it detonated, it would destroy not only the enemy fleet, but the humans themselves. The commander's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold steady. If we fall, we take them all with us." The flagship shook as alarms screamed and the hidden weapon glowed like a newborn star inside its armored cradle. Heat rippling across bulkheads and warning lights, painting the bridge in red. Officers shouted status reports, while the commander stood in the center like a pillar of iron. The second enemy fleet surrounded the Visari world in a shell of fire. Bioships fed on energy, metal supercapitals organized into kill wedges, and a storm of missiles and beams closed in on the human shield wall. The weapon's core was overloading, its power spiraling beyond safe limits, but the commander did not blink. He spoke in a voice that cut through the chaos. "Vent overload in stages. Vector it forward. Build a corridor." All across the flagship, engineers moved with cold focus. Massive conduits opened. Magnetic fields shifted. The weapon, instead of tearing the ship apart, began bleeding energy straight ahead, shaping a river of violent light into a single direction. The human dreadnought wall pivoted, shields locking and overlapping. In the gap they created, the vented power howled into space like a white storm. The nearest bioconstructs turned toward it, spines flaring as they tried to drink, but the torrent was not a simple beam. The vent carried raw, unstable particles and a dense cloud of kinetic debris from emergency coolant rods that had been vaporized and flung forward at a fraction of light. The bioships swallowed poison, their skins blistered, their cores swelled. One detonated in a ring of burning flesh. Another folded in on itself, spines snapping like spears. The wall held for 12 long seconds, while the flagship shed death like a volcano. Then the vent dropped. The weapon dimmed. The flagship went dark for a heartbeat. Backup lattices kicked in. The bridge light steadied. The commander did not wait. All ships advance. Rails to maximum. Fighters, cut lanes and seed decoys. Carriers, launch reserve wings. Cruisers punch through their wedges and break their timing. The human fleet moved as one. Dreadnoughts surged with shields forward, their railguns firing in steady rhythm. Each slug was a promise of ruin. Carriers spilled fighters into the dark, black darts weaving between beams and missile contrails, tagging targets for guided kinetics. Cruisers sprinted into the teeth of enemy fire, then pivoted in tight arcs, dumping canister clouds of smart shrapnel that ate through fighter swarms and blinded targeting arrays. Across the Visari skies, the battle became a single terrible heartbeat. The enemy's supercapitals tried to flank, but the humans cut their timing with brutal coordination. A line of 3 battleships sacrificed lateral shields to open a window for a pair of torpedo destroyers. The destroyers streaked through like knives and buried heavy torpedoes under the armor belt of a supercapital. The ship split along its spine and fell in 2 burning halves. A cluster of bioships dove toward the flagship to finish what the overload had started, but the humans had learned. They cut power to key emitters for a split second and instead hurled dense slugs in tripled salvos, aiming not at the hull but at the junctions where living tissue fused with metal conduits. The first bioship lurched as its nervous system broke. The second burst when a volley found the sack holding its reactor symbiote. The third spun away, trailing boiling gore. On the ground, the Visari looked up and saw a sky of fire. They had watched their cities fall for weeks. Now they watched a wall of human warships drive toward an impossible enemy without slowing. Children cried into their elders' robes and then stared, because the fear became awe and they could not look away. In the ruins where human soldiers had just taken the cannon complex, the squad leader checked the horizon and listened to the thunder that rolled from the heavens. He gave a single nod to his team. The worst storm is above us. The squad fanned out and cleared refugee corridors while drones climbed to paint enemy drop zones and mark survivors for evacuation if the orbit failed. They did not speak of retreat. They organized to be useful even under a dying sun. Far across the galaxy, the Galactic Council chamber was full of whispering and white faces as the live feeds showed the human fleet pushing into the Red Sea of enemy signatures. One delegate whispered that this was not war and not rescue but judgment. Another said it was HFY truth and that the legends were never lies. The council leader watched without blinking. He saw supercapitals fall. He saw bioships rupturing. He saw human dreadnoughts bleeding fire and still holding formation. He saw a commander who refused to bend. He felt something like relief and something like horror and knew both were true. In orbit, the enemy realized the human weapon would not be allowed to fire again in its full mode, and so they switched tactics. The Armada pulled back from the human wall and formed a coil around the planet, aligning for a saturation strike meant to deep cook the atmosphere and shatter the crust. Their doctrine was simple. If they could not defeat the Deathworlders cleanly, they would end the Visari and force the humans to choose between pursuit and protection. The commander saw the coil form and spoke 3 words: break the ring. Human fighters climbed and then fell, dragging behind them long chains of decoys that bent beams and spoofed seekers. Cruisers cut in perpendicular lines and lit space, with overlapping fields that wrenched guidance systems off target. Dreadnoughts split into hammer groups that drove wedges into the coil, while carriers fed the gaps with reserve wings. The sky over the Vessery world turned into a maelstrom of steel, plasma, and stone as the humans deployed their last trick. They opened the asteroid lockers. Hundreds of captured rocks, rough and jagged, poured from cargo bays and were lashed by tug drones into loose clusters. Rail tugs fired, and the clusters went forward as kinetic storms with transponder tags for fighter lanes. The enemy tried to shoot the rocks. The rocks did not care. They punched through screens and shattered radiators. They cracked open armored bows. They blocked shot lines and forced the coil to twist. The ring broke. The enemy lost the timing of their saturation barrage. The humans did not waste the opening. The flagship rolled and pointed its prow straight at the largest enemy node, and every rail aboard the fleet fired in a single, perfect beat. The node went dark. The coil sagged. The humans surged. A Visari child on the surface squealed and pointed as a ribbon of falling stars cut across the night. They were not stars. They were pieces of broken supercapitals. The squad leader shielded a group of civilians from shockwaves as a battleship fell flaming into the high air and shattered into 1,000 sparks. The humans did not look up. They handed out water and checked barricades and pushed deeper into rescue corridors, because that was the mission below while the verdict was written above. On the enemy flagship, the warlords stared at numbers that would not make sense. A force that should have crushed any sane fleet was being cut apart by a species that should have been too young to hold this much power. He ordered a final charge toward the planet to force collateral. He ordered a burn to the core. He ordered everything that proud empires order in their last minutes. The humans answered with a cold maneuver. They opened a lane right through the center and then shut it behind with overlapping shields while 4 dreadnoughts crossed fire at close range. The enemy flagship took it all and tried to keep coming. It died with its engines still flaring and its bridge still lit. For a long moment there was only static and falling light. Then the commander spoke. No quarter for active guns. Accept surrender from lifeboats. Protect civilians. Finish it clean. The battle did not stop all at once. It ended the way storms end when mountains stand. The thunder rolled away. The lightning moved to the horizon. The rain slowed. And then there was only smoke drifting above a wounded world. The human fleet reformed in layers, shields still up, weapons still warm, fighters still circling. The flagship's weapon bay closed and locked with a hollow boom that every officer felt in their bones. Engineers slumped in their chairs. Medics ran from station to station. Pilots breathed again. On the ground, the Visari came out of hiding and fell to their knees, not to worship and not to beg, but because their legs could not hold the weight of the moment. Human soldiers in black armor moved through the ruins with slow steps, scanning, guiding, lifting rubble, carrying children, sealing medkits over burns. They were storms at war, but they were hands at peace. A Vesari elder took a soldier's gloved hand and pressed it to his forehead, and the soldier did not pull away. In the council chamber, the delegates stood together for the first time that day. No one spoke. They watched the human fleet hanging like night above the planet. Some were grateful. Some were afraid. Most were both. The council leader broke the silence with a voice that had the crack of a gavel. The verdict is clear. We live today because humanity came. We may tremble at their power. We may fear their future. But we live. Across the black, a signal moved on open channels in every language anyone could read. It came from the flagship and it was plain. Visari are under human protection. All hostile forces stand down. Medical and relief lanes open now. Any who interfere will be treated as combatants. There was no threat in the tone. There was only certainty. The enemy remnants fled into the dark. Some jettisoned weapons and begged for pickup. Human cutters marked the pods and moved on. The fleet did not chase beyond the gravity well. The mission was the world below. The commander finally allowed himself to breathe. He looked down at the blue and broken land and thought of Earth far away, with its seas and forests and storms. He remembered the first call. Send the Deathworlders. He had answered. He would answer again. He turned to his officers and gave the next set of orders. Rotate the wall. Cycle the wounded. Drop relief domes. Send heavy lifters. Open a channel to Visari Command and prepare a joint council with civilian leaders. We rebuild. The bridge crew moved without question. The fleet obeyed. The galaxy watched. In the ruins, a small boy stood on a shattered step and raised his hand to the sky as if he could touch the giant shapes above. The squad leader placed a ration bar in the boy's palm and pointed at the sky and said one sentence through his helmet speaker. "You are safe." The boy smiled for the first time since the fires began. Night settled. Emergency lights flickered across the city. Human beacons pulsed on rooftops. Drones built temporary shelters with clean lines and warm air. Somewhere far above, the commander stood alone for a moment at the forward viewport. He had seen the worst of the enemy and the best of his people in a single day. He knew the council would speak of balance and fear. He knew many species would whisper that the war had crowned a new ruler, whether humans wanted it or not. He did not care for crowns. He cared for orders that saved lives and ships that came home. A final transmission arrived on a secure band, weak but clear. It was not from the enemy and not from the Visari, it carried the signature of watchers in the deep dark, a civilization older than most myths. The message had only 4 words. "We have seen enough." The commander read it once, and then sent it to archives. He turned back to the planet and let the stars reflect in his eyes. Across the galaxy, 1,000 worlds replayed the last image of the battle. The wall of human warships, the giant weapons light, the ring of the enemy breaking. The sudden quiet after the storm. Someone on a distant moon wrote a simple line that spread in a day. They begged for aid, and humanity sent Deathworlders. The line became a title, and the title became a truth. In the end, it was not victory that the galaxy remembered, but the verdict that followed. Humans had come when asked. Humans had saved a world. Humans had shown what a death world taught a species about war and duty and mercy. The council's screens went dark one by one. The Visari slept in tents under human lights. The fleet kept watch in the night, and the stars for a little while were quiet.